Most investors follow trends. Very few develop edge. This show focuses on something different: how serious operators build durable wealth in overlooked niches, starting with mobile home parks. We'll break down the strategy, underwriting, discipline, talk about the roadblocks, and the operational execution that'll make your capital aligned with long term returns. This isn't about chasing deals. It's about thinking like an allocator and executing like an operator. This is the Mobile Home Park Exchange. So today, our guest is Karl Kulpak. Karl is, I've been watching him and seeing what he's been doing on social media for the past couple of years. And I had the opportunity to meet with Karl a couple of months back in Louisville, right? We had a chance to finally meet each other in person. And I was really excited about his story and what he's done and how he's built his business. So I'm really excited to have Karl Kulpak join us on the Mobile Home Exchange podcast. Karl, how are you today?
Good. It's great to be here. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
I appreciate you being here, Karl. And I want to dive in with this question because last year, April 2025, I heard you on a podcast. At that time, you had 97 pads, right? And you said your goal in 12 months was to be at 260 units, right? Publicly stated that was your goal. We're about 14 months from that point. Where are you today?
Today, I have 242 units.
So here's what I find amazing, right? And what I wanted to ask you about first. So many people set goals or wishes, right, of where they want to be. What is it about you that had you get like right? You're right over target. How did you do that inside of 12 months?
I feel like I just backed into where I wanted to go. So I figured out that if I could have X number of units and I'm netting about $200 per unit at the end of each month, then how much cash flow do I need for my lifestyle? I kind of backed into where I needed to go and then figure out how many parks do I need to get there. And I just started crushing LOIs and sending them out to brokers on prices that made sense for me and just trying to get deal after deal to meet that goal as quick as I could.
And I love what you did there because you knew exactly, you had a very clear vision of where you wanted to be to get you to what you wanted. But the steps of doing it is where I think a lot of people fall short. Like, what is it about? Is it like a discipline? Was it a motivation? Like, what was the superpower that you had that really allowed you to hit that target? Because I mean, you see it whether it's a health goal people have, or they lose either momentum along the way, or so how is it that you were able to stick with that, even though, because it's not all a bed of roses to get there, right?
It's not, it's tough. I feel like it's grit that just gets you there because you know that this life is possible that you're trying to get to. And I also think that's meeting other people that have already done this and you see the life that they've built. So you know that it's possible for yourself because they're just normal people just like you. So if they can do it, then you can do it. So if you put the effort and continue to make progress, you can get there too. So I think that changed. That shared belief was a big deal.
So it's interesting you say that because I've heard you say in other podcasts that you've been on that you made it a point of being in the right rooms. What did you mean by that? And what did you mean by that statement?
So it's putting yourself in rooms where other people are doing really big things. So getting around other operators that have 1,500 lots and seeing what they've built and hearing from them personally, the struggles and the goals and the excitement that they had through the process, and just really feeling that and knowing it's going to be hard. It's not butterflies and rainbows, and you just have to keep pushing, but you could do it because you're very similar to them. They're not too much different than you are.
It's I think people have a challenge with that. And when you talk about being in the right rooms, you never want to be the quote unquote smartest person in the room, because then you can't learn anything, right? You always want to challenge yourself with people who maybe are one step ahead, and that makes people a little bit uncomfortable. So, was it you being in certain masterminds? Did you go for coaching, mentoring? Like, what were the steps that you took? Because, we're going to get to this. You didn't come from a real estate background, but you built this, and you built this over time, but pretty quickly, right? So, what was it specifically that you did, like the specific action steps, Carl, that you took that allowed you to grow this type of portfolio in this time frame?
I think the first start of was knowledge. So I commuted to Philadelphia for my W-2, and I was driving 45 minutes to an hour each way. So I would just put on a podcast about mobile home parks and listen day in and day out, hour after hour during that commute, and just soak up everything I could learn on a podcast. So I listened to multiple podcasts and just absorbed all that knowledge, but you have to take action. So I think putting yourself in those rooms with the knowledge that you have, and then learning from those other people, and then taking that action. I think that's the misstep, is people get all this knowledge, they learn from other people, but then they never take enough action to grow anything.
And that's a great point, because it's action becomes the greatest teacher, right? You could get all that knowledge, right? It's like taking the best and leaving the rest, right? So you take that best knowledge, you put your best foot forward, and then you got to go out there and make your own mistakes along the way, right? Because that's how you're going to learn. And you're going to be a little uncomfortable doing that. You're going to be a little challenged in doing that, but that discomfort is where you find that growth, and where you find that ability to move forward. So you found a coach.
Mm-hmm.
I know in this history, you found a coach. What was it about that coach, that mentor that you found, or those masterminds that really clicked for you? And what were the action steps that you took immediately?
So I met my coaches, my first coaches, Kevin and Tia Spangenberg, and they hosted a 4-day mastermind event. And I listened to their webinar, and I ended up winning a ticket at the end of the webinar because they were giving away a seat. And I won the ticket. All I had to do was get myself there. So I felt like I owed them. They gave me a ticket. Now I have to produce. I have to make it worth them giving me a ticket to go out and actually take action. So the 4 days, they broke down everything they were doing line by line by line. I was like, wow, these people are from Pennsylvania, just like I am. They worked regular jobs, W-2 jobs, and then they built this huge portfolio. And I was like, man, if I could just get a few of these things, this would change my life. So that's what I did. After the mastermind, I went out and just started sending offers out and got my first mobile home park a couple months after that mastermind.
So I love that, because it's just going out there, putting that to, that knowledge to use, and you have to do it right away, right?
You have to.
Because if you don't, you're never going to do that. Like if you join the gym in January, you're not going to start going in June, right? You have to go right away, because you have to make that effort, and you have to rewire your brain to look a little bit differently at what you said you want to do. So that intention that you had going there, putting those action steps, that puts, if somebody out there is listening, just by doing that puts you ahead of 80% of the people that show up and then don't take action from that point forward. And that's such a key critical step. So now you alluded to this, and we're working backwards a little bit. You had a W-2 job. You were a state trooper. So, you had a job that obviously required a lot of your capacity, right? You have to be focused doing what you're doing there. How were you able to build your real estate business alongside of that W-2 job, while you were doing that?
So I was commuting, so I had time in the car, so I could make some phone calls, listen to podcasts. And then anytime that I wasn't working on that, I was working on my real estate stuff. I was calling brokers, reading more books, doing my spreadsheets. I had a couple single family homes at the time and a fourplex. So I had some residential real estate that I bought a couple years into working that W-2. So that started my journey. That was 2016. But I never really grew. It took me like, another 8 years to actually do anything substantial. So there was a long time of waiting around and just doing a deal here, a deal there. But it took quite some time to finally take a big enough action to make a real impact and be able to leave a job that people thought I was crazy for leaving. They're like, why would you leave a pension and benefits and all this stuff? You're going to give that up to go, take a chance on yourself in real estate. And I had to.
You, you do, right? You do have to take that bet on yourself. But what I love about what you said before is, people think that it's easy, right? Stepping into, I've talked to people and they say, well, you've always worked for yourself, so you have the ability to do it. Well, there's a difficulty and a challenge in that, right? And for you, you realize that if you wanted to get to where you wanted to be, it doesn't just happen, right? You had to put in that extra work. You have to sacrifice a little now to get those gains down the road if this is where you wanted to be. But you did have, that state a very important, and thank you for your service, a very important job, a very serious job. Like, how did that role help you prepare for what you're doing today?
I think a lot of that was grit. Just, you were like punished in the academy. It was awful. Like, tons of physical fitness. They just pushed you to the limit, screaming at you. It was very difficult, but it showed you that you could pretty much get through anything if your mind is set on doing it and just surviving through it. So I think that if I could do that academy, then I could pretty much do anything else in the normal world. So that definitely helped, just having that experience and bringing that to real estate, where no matter how bad it gets, it's not that bad.
Carl, I've seen, and I have a friend of mine who was a sergeant, and he did the same thing. Like, he pivoted into real estate, and I've seen a couple of retired officers do well in real estate. And I'm thinking of one friend in particular who in New York was in multifamily and affordable housing in that subsector, and he did very well. And the way I looked at it is his skill set of dealing with people in probably when he was dealing with the public, he was dealing at the most emotionally strained time, right? No one calls a police officer when everything is going okay, right? You're not calling 911 because it's a birthday party. You're calling them because there's a situation in distress, and the ability to handle that, I think, it transitions really well into the real estate space, especially the affordable housing space. I mean, do you think that gives you a little bit of an advantage when dealing with people, or in how to deal with people?
For sure. Because I could talk to anybody. I'll go to a mobile home park. I'll talk to anybody in the park. It doesn't matter. Because I'm used to communicating with, everyone. People call the state police for service, and you're going to meet someone that's having the worst day of their life, and you have to be there to help solve their problem. So it's very similar to real estate, where a resident's calling you maybe on a bad day and they're having a problem, and you're there to help solve their problem. So your communication skills and understanding what they're going through and how you can help them I think it is a huge advantage, just that communication aspect and not being afraid to just go have a conversation.
Yeah. And and it and not getting emotionally charged about it,
Mhm.
which I think people forget, because it's easy as an owner operator, you are emotionally vested in that property, right? It might be a significant portion of your net worth. It might be something that you're looking to do. So your emotional investment in there sometimes allows the emotions to get the better of you. But in your training, you as an officer, you can't go into a situation emotionally charged, right? You have to be, you know, unemotional, logical to de-escalate that situation. And in real estate, which is, I think, the ultimate people's business, right? You have to have a lot of that same characteristic. You cannot allow the emotions of the moment cause you to create a reaction that could be detrimental to the property long term.
That's true.
You know, so you've been in real estate. You decided, after, and I know how downplay it. Like, oh, I bought a couple of single family homes at a fourplex. It wasn't really growing, but that had a compound, right? Over time. I mean, 7, 8 years of doing that. What made that shift to you to say single family renting, this isn't going to get me where I want to be? Now I have to make that move into manufactured housing. Like, what made that shift, that mind shift to you? Was it something that you saw? Or was it something that you like? What was that?
I think it was listening to all the podcasts during my commutes and then also attending that mastermind. That made it real. So seeing the numbers on the board, like the volume, if you have 1,500 lots and you do a $10 rent raise each year for 3 years, you're talking 15,000 in NOI per month just by clicking a button. And I was like mowing lawns at my single families, fixing water heaters. I was like, what am I doing with my life? These people are clicking a button and making $15,000 a month. I'm wrestling naked dudes on the side of 95 as a state trooper, high on meth, Why would I do that when I could just go over here, click this button? So I think that put it in their perspective. Like, there's way more out there than the work that I was doing.
But you got tired of wrestling on the side of the highway?
I did. It takes a toll on you. It's a lot. It's a tough job. And
so you took the easiest path in real estate. Of course, you decided to own mobile home parks, which of course is the easiest path to go into real estate. So now, you buy your first park, and you've bought your second one. And one thing that struck me, because a lot of people talk about creative financing, but you actually been able to implement a couple of creative strategies to move forward. So what was one of those creative deals that you did that said, okay, this is going to, I can make this work because I'm going to look at this situation and think differently?
So it was my second deal for sure. It was a 55 unit park on city water, city sewer, bunch of park owned homes, probably about 30% park owned. And they're just older single wides close together, kind of a rural area in Ohio. But when I was talking to the broker, he's like, hey, there's a in-place seller finance note. The price or the property was listed at like 2.2, I think. And the note that was still on there was 1.4. I was like, okay, I could assume a seller finance note. And then I found a private lender that would lend in second position. So I made an offer at $2 million, assuming the $1.4 million note and bringing $600,000 in a second position to close this deal for basically just closing costs and rehab budget. So I ended up buying this 55 unit park for $2 million for closing costs. So that was a huge deal.
And that was only there because you found out, like you asked the right questions to find out what was really at the heart of the issue, right? And that is such an important, and this is where I think our journeys are very similar, because we had a situation one time where we were closing on a property. The owner was willing to do some financing. The challenge was we wanted it at a rate where the cash flow didn't support the rate he wanted. We knew the value was there. Ultimately, his concern was keeping up with inflation, right? So at the time, inflation's at 6.5%. For us, 6.5% out of cash flow while we're making while money has to be redeployed in the asset just didn't work. So we were able to structure a deal where he just wanted to ensure he was getting current with the rate of inflation, but he didn't need the money now. So he was willing to defer that interest to the back end of the loan. And so we could operate with the cash flow we needed for the property to work. So that was us really not just saying, hey, here's the offer. It was getting to the root of the problem. Like, why are you stuck on this number? And how can we resolve that issue that works for both parties? And I think that's such a key component of asking the right questions and then asking the right follow-up questions of, okay, if we can't do this, why can't we do this? And how can we overcome that? Because ultimately both sides want to get to the same place, right? Seller wants to sell the property, and on the buy side, you want to buy the property. And it's working those situations out, which I think is so critical.
I agree. I think there's always sellers that are willing to make deals that work for the numbers that they're looking for. So just understanding where the seller's coming from and what they want to walk away with or what their lifestyle goals are. I think there's deals to be had that people overlook just because they may be overpriced a little bit. However, there could be a creative option in there to make the seller happy and you would still be happy because the value of the park's going to improve over time as you operate it.
Yeah. So now let's look where you are today. Right. You hit last year's goal. Right. You got to. I mean,
It's close.
within 5-6% of where you need to be. You're there. What are you? What are you targeting next? Like, where does Carl and what are you looking to go to at the next stage? Are you comfortable where you are, or is there more growth in the horizon?
There's definitely more growth. So my goal this year is to do 500 total lots. So I currently have two parks under contract, 26 units and 42 units. So I'm looking to close those and continue moving forward. I have a couple offers out on some parks and shooting towards my goal of hitting 500 this year.
So here's what I think is so important for everybody out there listening, because as you grow, things start to evolve. So now, and I'm going to use the from the single family house where you're mowing the grass, right? Now you buy your first park where you're probably doing everything, right? Now you're at 250 lots, right? What did you have to break? Like, what did you say? This is where I don't step into anymore, and this is what I delegate, and these are the systems I put in place. And then the second part is how do you what has to break to get to 500, right?
So I think two parks was fine. Doing two by yourself, perfectly fine. I got three and then four. I was like, this is overwhelming because now and these are, they're C class. Some of them are turnaround parks. So you're getting a lot of phone calls and I'm answering all the phone calls. I was like, I can't handle all this. So I brought in a VA to help just do the tenant facing activities. So she works with me on Rent Manager. She handles all inbound phone calls. She texts the residents and she had prior property management experience and it's been unbelievable to have her on my team. So just bringing one extra person in that's working full time is a game changer. So that alleviated most of the tenant activities. Unless she can't solve it, then I deal with it. But besides that, that gives me more time to focus on some of the higher level stuff or the more, important tasks like EPA stuff or that kind of bank information. So I could focus on that stuff and spend more time doing that. And she could deal with most of the tenant activities. So I think that was a big change.
Yeah, I remember when the first few parks, like every tenant would have our phone number, and and I remember, and I've heard you say this because we would do the same thing. We would knock on the doors. Here's the welcome package, new owners. This is what we're looking to do. But then it gets to a point, and you're approaching it where you can't specifically do that, right? And that's where you have to say, I need systems and processes in place that's going to allow this to continue to grow without me having to do everything on there. Are you still actively involved on the day to day? Do you have, what does your organization look like at this point?
So right now it's still just me and the VA. So Jasmine handles all that, and then I handle everything else right now. But at this point, I'm looking to bring on an operations manager because I need help selling some homes and coordinating Jasmine's activities day to day, and also dealing with some of the other operational things. So I did hire a bookkeeper, so they start as well. So that helps with my accounting. And then I'll hire on an operations manager. But I need someone that's, better at property management than I am. Knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and each one of your properties, you have a managers in place. Like you're not buying stabilized properties. Like you're buying properties that need some work, right? You're doing the lift.
Yes, they definitely need some love. So I do have in park managers, and they're a game changer. they really help turn around some of these parks because they're boots on the ground all the time. So they could just reach out if they have any issues, and we could get things solved rather quickly with direct communication with them. So I
Hmm.
think that's a key point. Some people try and eliminate in-park managers on smaller deals, but if it's a turnaround deal, I think they're key to turning the park around.
I think, and I think I have this conversation because there's operators that say if they own their homes, you don't need anybody there. But you still need to. I think the resident stays in those communities because it's a community, and they still want to have that touch and feel. Like they may have stayed in a community that needed work because they felt a attachment to the owner, and keeping that community feel while you're not next door. Like we used to tell people, we're not local, but we're very hands on. Like you're going to know our presence. I think that's such an important key element in this space, which you don't necessarily have to do in the multifamily space, right? If somebody rents an apartment, they rent an apartment because location, because of amenities, because of price. But in typical fashion, there's a transition period, right? Like apartment is not supposed to be your lifelong situation. You're either buying a house or you're moving on. But if you own a home and that home is in Call's community, they want to be there a long time. They're committing typically 12, 13, 14, 15 years of their life in your community, and they want to know that Call cares, right? So like what do you do, or how do you kind of communicate that message to the residents?
Yeah, some of our residents have lived there their entire life. They grew up in the park and they're still there as grown adults. And now they're having, adult children that want to move back to the park. So I think building that community, we do community parties throughout the year that the park pays for. So you bring in food and you have the park manager host the party, and the park just pays for all the stuff and brings the community together. I think those have been really important because it gets all the community members together, and it builds that relationship bond between neighbors as well. So maybe more people want to stay in the park because all their friends are there as well. So I think that's a key part, is just getting everybody together and then just enjoying each other's company and making it, like you said, it's more community based than an apartment building.
And I've noticed, Carl, like over time, where if we're doing our job correctly, right, and if you're always going to have some marketing and sales going on, you have empty lots, empty homes, you're bringing in homes, whatever the case may be, but your best marketing is going to be the people inside the community who are going to refer their friends, families, cousins, coworkers, right? Because they're going to want them to live close to them. So if you do a good job of instilling that culture and instilling that community feel inside those communities, then they're your sounding board. And we found in certain communities where you'll have certain, call them like nucleuses of influencers, who all of a sudden you'll find, hey, three people working at that plant are coming in because one person introduced them to it, or this person referred three of their family members, four of their family members to move in. And so you end up having pockets of people who are that nucleus. And that's one of the ways we could gauge if, all right, is our plan working, in terms of our business plan, is our manager being effective, and are people getting that sense of community that we're trying to build. And I think that's something that becomes really important over time, because if they're referred from somebody else, they already like and trust you, right? Like, so that's a key component to it.
Yeah, for sure. You want people to want to bring people they want to live next to your park.
Yeah. So I've heard you say this. You brought in some homes and you did some infill. Like we talk about that a lot. Um, if you had to do some infill now, would you do that again?
I would not buy a heavy infill project. So it's got to be mostly full and maybe there's a handful of empty lots. I would take that on. But big infill projects, I'm just not at the level where it's consistent and I can know for sure that I could bring these homes in and get them full. At some point, I would like to be there, but today's not the day.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Um, so you're focused right now. Um, you're buying mainly in Pennsylvania and Ohio. Like, what do you see in those markets? Like, what's driving Call to find a good opportunity? How do you define what you're looking for? Is it a specific, do you have like a specific buy box? Is there things that you filter out? Like, how does Carl, underwrite a good opportunity?
So I'm looking at parks that are, most of them are broker relationships or on market. So I'm looking over tons of deals, and I look for ones that maybe are under rented, they're not billing back utilities, and the price per occupied pad is less than I could get for the new lot rent. So if I'm looking at a park and it's 20,000 per occupied pad, but I know in that county, in that area, I can get 450 a month for lot rent, I know there's a deal to be had there.
Yeah. And I've heard you say that you like to do some mystery shopping, right? And I think, right. So why don't you explain to everybody who's like, what do you do if you're finding something, because you're not buying in your backyard, right? You might be going into a market that you're not completely familiar with. Like, what are some of the steps that you take to see if your assumptions in terms of where lot rent can go will stick?
Sure. So I'll go to the Housing and Urban Development website and find what are their rental rates for that county. So you pick the state, pick the county. Sometimes you end up picking the zip code, and it gives you what a studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom will rent for in that area. So then I have a baseline. Okay, I maybe could get, $1,000 for a 2 bedroom. So I'll go on Zillow, see what 2 bedroom apartments are going for, get an idea if that's accurate. Are they getting 1,000 or are they getting less? And then I'll mystery shop all the surrounding nicer mobile home parks and call all these operators and ask them, hey, I'm moving my grandmother in. What is your lot rent for, this home you have over here? So mystery shopping them to really gauge what is the actual lot rent that they're getting in other communities that are similar or nicer than the one I'm looking at right now. So then okay, if they're getting 475 and they're a really nice community, I could at least get 425 for my community as I make it nicer.
You know, that's going a little bit beyond the numbers, right? I think a lot of people will look at just the numbers and say, okay, this number, this pencils, this doesn't, and you could make anything work, on an Excel spreadsheet, but it's having the ability to go beyond that and look beyond that to find the story, which is going to either save you lots of money, right, or in turn make you a lots of money because you're going to be able to find something that other people do not find, right? You're going to be able to get a little bit beyond that. We were looking at a deal recently, and there was a little bit of value in there, and we're looking at this park, and they had a lot of RTOs in the park, and part of what they were trying to say, like, these are newer homes, we put them in as RTOs, they're going to convert. But as we looked at the park beyond the numbers, we realized that it was next to another park that was essentially a junkyard. So where all the new homes came in on that one road, all the new homes are backed up to a park that's a junkyard, and obviously there's no fencing there. So the numbers might look great, but then we know operationally, well, here's my challenge. If I got vagrants, if I got squatters, if I got people right next door, am I going to be able to sell those homes there? Probably not, or it's going to be challenged, or I'm going to have to discount, or I'm going to have some operational problems. So I have to bake that into my offer day one if I want to go forward with it. And that's going beyond just looking at what a spreadsheet is. And those little things, I think, is probably one of the key factors of why you've been so successful in the period of time that you've been doing this, and how you've been doing this. So, you've talked about a deal that you did, and I love dissecting this because it was a major win for you. Like, you created 7 figures of equity, right, in a relatively short period of time. So deconstruct that a little bit for everybody who maybe isn't familiar with. Walk me through that deal and how you created that type of value, and which was just unlocked inside of the same property that somebody just sold to you.
So for the Olympic deal, that was, I looked through the rent roll, and they're getting, $350 a month for a lot rent, which is fair. And so I looked through the area and I was like, man, I think this is under rented. And I'm looking at these other parks and they're getting 475, creeping up to 500 for some of the other parks in the area. I was like, this has got a lot of value in here and they're not capitalizing on it. And they weren't billing back for water. They were paying a third-party management company about 30,000 a year to operate it. I was like, I can cut that out because all my management's in-house. So there's 30,000 right to the bottom line, minus an in-park manager. And there was a lot of things that people just overlooked like that. And I think understanding where you could bring the park to, not just what it is today, was the differentiator. It's just knowing that I can make this park nicer and generate a lot more NOI than what they're getting.
So what were the numbers on that when you first bought that park?
I don't have them right up in front of me, but they weren't bad. So they were doing okay for what it was.
Okay.
So you figure 55 units at 350 in lot rent, and they're paying, 2,500
But
bucks a month for a water bill and sewer bill. So they were doing decent,
but
but
what did you pay? What did you pay for the park?
I paid 2 million.
2 million, and then you just did a refinance though, and you and what was the value that you ended up
So the
at?
appraiser came in at 3.7 million, and I took out a loan for a little over 2 million. So I generated about 1.7 million in equity in a little over 12 months.
That that is not a for everybody listening there. That is not a typical return that people get. So that is an extraordinary value creation inside a 24-month window. Was that it?
I would say sub 18 months for that.
So that's an incredible value creation inside of 18 months, and quite frankly, that's just a testament to what you've been doing and how you've built your team and your operation. So congratulations to you, man. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not all butterflies and rainbows. It's a lot of rehabs, park-owned homes that we're converting to RTOs. So there's definitely some nuances to dealing with park-owned homes for sure. But I think they're at the right price point where people are willing to pay, 850 to 900 for a two-bedroom as their total amount that they owe each month. And I think that is missing. It's got to be affordable. So maybe the price of the home you could reduce a little bit, but make the payment affordable. And I think that's very important to people.
Yeah, if listen, at the end of the day, I think what we've seen, especially um, over the past few years, I mean, we have a housing crisis in this country, right? And this has been built up over over a decade, where we have not built to the needs of the population as we've grown. We've underbuilt in this country for, probably from 2008 to 2022. I mean, it's just, and now building stopped again. So there is somewhere between 4.8 and 6 million homes that were short, and affordability is an issue. And ultimately, we are providing the most affordable housing stock and options available. And if you're running a clean community, that there's a value to that. So I think that creates a moat around our business and allows us to say that we're going to have, regardless of what happens in the economy, I think there's a need and a driver for what we're doing. Carl, you're looking to get to 500 units over the next 12 months, right? You've been public about it. You stated it, which I like, because now you're setting that goal there. What do you need to do to get there? Like, you're looking at, like, what does Carl have to do to make sure that he hits his next goal?
I definitely have to make a chart of what I should be doing on a day-to-day activity and how can I bring someone in that can do some of these tasks that are not my highest and best use. So I should be focusing on finding more deals and not day-to-day activities that I can outsource to someone that's better at them than I am. So that's definitely a key part in spending my time doing things that move the needle.
You know, we found that I found the same thing in our journey, and somebody told me one time, and it stuck with me. As you start to grow, if you look at a rocket ship, right, and as it goes higher up, the more of the payload it lets go. So the higher it goes, the more it lets go and allows you to focus on really what is your unique ability. And that's what helps the organization grow. And that's having the right systems, processes, and workflows in place so you can find out where the roadblocks are and making sure that I'm not the roadblock, that I'm trying to go down and solve every problem and let the process itself work. But it sounds like you're, obviously killing it, in terms of getting to where you want to be and focused on it. I'm sure that we're going to see more of that in the future. If you had anything that you look out into the manufactured housing space over the next 12, 24 months, like what do you see? Is there any roadblocks or obstacles you see in the industry itself, or anything that you're seeing in the industry long term?
I think there's a lot of opportunity in the industry. I think now is a great time for good operators to get in before a lot of these nicer, bigger parks are kind of swallowed up by private equity, because there's a huge wave coming and they're buying the nicer Class A, bigger deals. So if we can scoop up, the mid-sized parks and position ourselves for possibly an exit down the road with a large package of lots, I think you could really do well in the next 10 years.
Obviously we're here. We agree with you. I think there's an opportunity for good operators in the space. I think the best time to get into this, into this business was 10 years ago. The next best time is today, right? So you don't want to wait any longer. So Karl, if anybody has any questions or wants to follow up with you and see what you're doing or find out more about your company, where would they be able to reach you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram are probably the easiest ones. Karl Kulpak. I'm on all three platforms, so feel free to reach out to any of those.
Karl, man, it's been a pleasure having you on the Mobile Home Park Exchange podcast. I appreciate you being participating in it, and I love hearing your growth story, and I can't wait to have you back on and hear more about what you're doing. If anybody has any questions, please reach out to Karl. We're going to put his information in the show notes. This has been another episode of the Mobile Home Park Exchange podcast. Until next time, everyone, happy investing.